Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, your resource for all things business, brand, and leadership. We are excited you have decided to join us today.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Elevate Podcast. I'm Robert Kaelin here with
Mike Newman. Great to be back with you again today as we continue some discussion around the work of Kouzes and Posner and their longitudinal research, which means consistently over a period of time that they've studied leadership. And today we're going to talk about characteristics of admired leaders. You know, we talk a lot about leadership and about it from the view of the leader. What we want to share with you today is what our constituents expect from us as leaders. It's like they say in their book, it's like knowing the other half of the story.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to bring to the table? What do we need to show up like every day? When we look at these things we talked about last time about challenging the process, inspiring a vision, enabling others to act, modeling the way, and encouraging the heart. These are things that are our responsibilities as a leader, but it's the characteristics that we bring that people really admire. And so in this longitudinal study that I was talking about that they've done, they've looked at over 20 different qualities of leaders and have identified 4 that have consistently come to the top over a 3-decade period of time of studying what people expect out of their leaders. So Robert, why don't you share with us what those 4 are? And we can then dive into each one of them a little bit and talk about it from a standpoint of looking at the characteristic or the trait of that person, and maybe some examples that we have of people who have been leaders in our lives that have had these characteristics.
It's good. I'll do it. Before I do that, I want to encourage you, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, go back and listen to that because there's some good stuff related to this conversation as we move forward. So with that, the 4 characteristics are these. They're honest. Who doesn't love an honest leader, huh? They are forward-looking, they're inspiring, and they're competent. Now, like Mike said, these guys have studied qualities of leaders in 6 different continents over decades of time, and this is the research that they've come up with. Now, the percentage of people that selected these things in honesty was 85% of the people said, you know what, honesty is a characteristic that I admire in a leader. 70% said forward-looking, 69% said inspiring, and 64% said competent. So out of all of their research, these were the top 4 and have consistently been the top 4 for decades. So people aren't changing. They're still expecting the same thing from their leaders. I know I do. I look at this list and I think to myself, I'm like, man, I definitely want my leaders to be honest. I want them to say things like it is. I want them to see the world not through rose-colored glasses, but with transparency and realism. I also want them to be honest with me in terms of feedback that I'm getting. I want them to be able to say maybe hard truths. Of course, they may have to say it delicately, because I don't want it to crush me or anything. But I also want them to be forward-looking. I don't know what I don't know, and I expect my leaders to know more than I do. Yeah. I want them to have my back when it comes to my future.
Let's talk about these first 2 a little bit about, you've kind of given what you want from the leader.
Sure.
In honesty, and honesty relates to our values, to our ethics, but it also relates to how people, as you were saying, can anticipate that we are going to respond in different situations. And so when there's confusion over what I value, what my core values are, what my ethics are, it creates a lot of stress in people's lives. Not knowing what the leader believes contributes to, additional conflict, and not knowing and creates indecision and creates oftentimes political, not election political things, but politics, office politics that happen. And when we simply don't trust people, who don't tell us what their values are, we don't trust them if we don't know. We don't trust them with their ethics and their standards if we don't know. And so as a leader, being honest is part of how you show up, and then how do you respond and react in different situations. Hopefully you're doing a lot more responding than reacting, but sometimes in an emergency situation, you're reacting. And what can people expect of you? And so honesty being one of those top characteristics, is about who we are, okay, and what we do. The other one that we started talking about was being forward-looking and being a visionary. And so last time we talked about a shared vision. So go back, as Robert was suggesting, listen to that episode and hear about the shared vision. But when they conducted their research, which was really interesting, they had in one study nearly 500 senior executives who were involved in this forward-looking visioning type of thing. And they said that they rated developing a strategic planning and forecasting capability was one of the most critical concerns of the business. So I get this opportunity, like I said, I get to sit at a table with some business owners who are in different stages of their business, one who is on the way out, one who's new, and we look at strategy and those types of things. And it's interesting to see how they look forward from the age at which they are. I get that advantage at the table. But in all cases, they've got to look forward. They've got to be able to say, here's where we're going, here's what we're doing, here's the reasons of why. And Robert, as you are in your business and you're looking forward at Elements or the other businesses that you run and involved in, how does this forward-looking vision play into what you do?
Literally everything. It plays into everything. And this kind of also ties into the other one, which is being inspiring, because that's kind of that sharing that enthusiasm and expectation and hope of what the future could look like, right? If you don't have a clear vision, I would say you probably shouldn't be leading. If you don't have a clear vision, you probably shouldn't be leading in that area. If you don't know where you're going, someone else needs to step in. There needs to be room for that. But what I think is it's really easy to get people to join the journey with you when you know where you're going and there's clarity in what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Yeah, sometimes we run into things that set us back a bit.
Yep.
Could be things like COVID, or it could be a downturn in the economy. It could be things like that. But you still need that forward-looking vision about where you're going, and you need that second or that third part of this thing that we're talking about that you mentioned just now about being inspiring.
Yeah.
You can't come in and go, well, the sky's falling and, things are, going down the toilet fast and expect your team to be focused on what you want them focused on. If that's how you come in, they're going to be focused on trying to find a different place to work.
And I think it ties in really well, because if your vision, your forward looking, isn't bigger than the challenges you're facing right now, your vision's not big enough. Right? Your mission and your vision should always be pushing you through all the challenges that you have. You know what? At Elements, our vision is to love people well. The purpose that we have is just to love people well, and we do that through creating unique experiences in the food and beverage arena to make that happen. And if COVID happens or a downturn in the economy, if I couldn't point to, okay, guys, hey, look, if our purpose is to love people well, how do we do that in the midst of this challenge?
Yeah. And so as a leader, you've got to, inspire passion. It doesn't mean that you have to be a rah-rah person all the time,
Nope.
But you got to have a passion for what it is that you're doing to inspire the team around you. Because if you don't, why would anybody else want to do that?
Yeah.
And as I look at this, and think about it, inspiring or being inspiring, I put this model in my head that I got to be like Pete Carroll, but I don't have to be like Pete Carroll. I just got to be like Mike.
Yep.
And and it's thinking through, how do I show up and being inspiring? And it gets back to this modeling the way that we talked about last time. It gets back in enabling people to act, and working on the heart of things that are there.
Yeah.
And it leads to our fourth one in the time that we got left here, about being competent. Being competent. I'll tell this little personal story, and then we can dive into a little bit more. But my mom, had to have a procedure done, and it was one that was scary to the family and everything else. And I went with my mom, and we went there and listened to what the doctor had to say, and went with the recommended procedure that was to be done. And then one of my family members called me up and said, "Hey, do you know if this person's a good doctor or not?" And I said, I don't know what you mean. She seems to be really competent. And I said, how would you know? She's got credentials. She's got everything she needs. She's a nice person. I trust her with mom, And my sibling said, well, I'm going to look up and see what her standards are, And I said, okay, you do that. But we're still going with what we have. Well, then she called me back, a few hours later. Yeah, she's the best one out there, But sometimes people will question somebody's competency,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have to be able to demonstrate competency in what we do. And so that doctor that we had 2 years ago happens to be the same one that I'm meeting with on Tuesday. Again, and I have all the faith in the world that she's going to take great care of my mom and make sure my mom, that this procedure comes out the way that it's supposed to be. Why?
Yeah.
One, she demonstrated competence, not because of the surgery that she performed, but because of the confidence that she came in the room with. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do this. And so as a leader, that's what our people are expecting of us. So,
yeah, I love that. And I want to add, competence is not you being perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I look back and I see things in my life, and people questioning competence, and being able to recognize that, look, there's areas of my business that I'm not competent in. I'm not competent in the financial aspect of business. Okay. I'll be the first to admit it. I can forecast like nobody's business, but when it comes to budgeting, I struggle with that. However, I have people on my team who can do those things, and I trust them wholeheartedly to do it. Now, if we lack competence in areas, the competency that people are looking for is competence that you have well-rounded, figured out game plan, not that you're a perfect person. You've mitigated your weaknesses. You have a solid foundation. You're looking forward, and I think that that's just as important in a leader for competence as, being skilled at what you do. Being skilled is super important as well, in your thing. If you're a doctor, I want to make sure that you got the credentials and that you are also like really good at your job, especially if you're taking care of somebody that I love.
Right. When you put all those things together that we were just talking about, of being honest, of being forward-looking, of inspiring, and being competent,
Yep.
What you get is credibility.
Yep.
You get credibility. And when you have credibility, guess what happens? People on your team are proud to be on your team. They want to be a part of their organization. They want to tell people they're part of the organization. You just take a team that does really well in sports. Everybody wants to be a part of that team, and the ones that aren't doing so well, they wear bags over their head during the game. But when we have credibility as a leader, there's a strong sense of team spirit that happens around it. There's also, the personal value that people have, that they bring their best selves to that. And so as having credibility as a leader and being the honest, forward-looking, inspiring, competent leader is going to create a sense of ownership with the other people in your organization. Yeah. And they're going to feel attached and committed to what you're doing with the organization way into the future.
Yep.
So with that, Robert, good. I know our time is up here. Anything you want to add?
I would just add the fact of, if we worked this backwards, credibility coming from being honest, looking forward, having really set values and understanding, having clarity. What you believe drives what you do, which determines your outcome. And so if you're struggling with credibility today, start at the bottom. Start with what you believe. Examine if it's true, and take the next right step. And if you're at the stage of credibility, keep going. Keep encouraging your team. Keep building leaders, because the world needs more of them. You guys, this has been a ton of fun. Mike, awesome having this conversation with you. Looking forward to next week. And until then, we'll see you there. That was a weird way to end it, but
look forward to you on our show next week.
There you go. That's what he said. Take care. God bless.
Thank you for joining us. Our hope is this episode has been helpful for you today. If it's impacted you in some way, we encourage you to share it with someone. To receive a direct notification of our next episode, click the follow button on your favorite app or platform. You can also watch each episode on YouTube. The links are in the description. If you want to connect with us on a deeper level, go to countercultureleadership.com/resources. We'll see you next week on the Elevate Podcast.